I'm glad you noticed them. I forgot to do them in the morning, so I was feeling real good about the fact. I actually have a sticky note right here. It says turn on captions. I put it in all caps to remind myself, and I still forgot this morning. So, but you can, when you're presenting in the present mode of slides, I'm using Google Slides right now, you can turn on captions as a presenter. So I hovered over, and I think you guys can see that little bar that pops up. There's a button here that says captions. And I just click that button, and now they show up. They're not perfect. You'll see that sometimes they don't quite capture the exact word that I said. If I talk really fast, it's really hard for them to keep up. So I am trying to talk slower today, but I am a fast talker. So, but you can turn on captions. So thank you, Kelsey, so much for asking about that and bringing attention so that I could share that with everyone. Thank you. So this deck can be accessed later. So this deck is, it's going to exist forever. I'm not going to delete it or move it. So you can find it either by the URL. You can actually bookmark it. Every Google Slides presentation has its own unique URL. It's its own place on the internet. So you can actually bookmark this URL and come back to this at any time. You can also copy the link that Allison is putting, the slide deck link that she's putting in. You can copy that link and paste that into a Google Doc or into, we're going to talk about Google Keep, which is like digital sticky notes. You can paste it in there. You can keep that URL for later. It's also going to live in the Sched. So you might have gotten to this deck through the New Teacher Orientation Sched page. There's that little button. I think it says something about maybe session folder or session resources, something like that. That little button. This deck will continue to live there. So you can come back to this New Teacher Orientation, find this session, and click on that button and find the folder that it lives in. So lots of ways to come back to this deck. So just be patient with yourself. If you walk away with one idea today, you are winning. Don't worry about it, all right? So you can always come back for more. Okay, our plan. This is the plan for the day. We've done some opening moves. I want to talk about app smashing and what that is in case you haven't heard about it. I want to introduce, like I said, 11 Google tools. I actually learned this morning I can go a little slower, so I'm very excited to not like run through them like I did this morning. We're going to talk really briefly about Google Classroom. Very brief. If you are new to Google Classroom, I'd highly recommend coming to our session. It's actually the next session time. It's also 2 times tomorrow. We have one specifically on Google Classroom. We're not really going to go into depth on Google Classroom today other than tell you that it exists and you can do a couple cool things in it. So if you are new to Google Classroom, I'd highly recommend coming to that other session instead where we'll go like deep into Classroom. But we're going to briefly touch on today about how to use Classroom to do some organization and collecting of work. And then we're going to wrap up with some closing moves. I'll give you time to do a cool down, space for feedback, and announcements. All right, here we go. This is our Department of Technology equity frame. And in DOT, we focus a lot on equity of access, having access to devices and to systems and apps and tools and structures, and then having equity of opportunity. And equity of opportunity is the things that students are asked to do with the tools. There's a very big difference between being asked to write a paper and being asked to collect data about something in the community, to solve a problem, and to write a proposal. Like those are very different tasks. And so while DOT, the Department of Technology, is generally in charge of the equity of access, we'll distribute Chromebooks to your students, we'll make sure that they have the apps and tools available to them that they need. It falls a lot on teachers to be the equity of opportunity piece, that you are the ones that get to choose what learning experiences your students have. And so you want to think about, again, balancing out the things you ask them to do. Not everything can be a wonderful, amazing, incredible project that uses all these different tools. That's exhausting. Don't do that. But making sure that you do offer those opportunities to have collaboration, to have a chance for kids to be creative and express themselves, to have a chance to, do critical thinking and problem solving, to solve real problems, things like that. So, kind of as you're thinking about these tools today, think about how can I, give students different opportunities to use tools in different ways to build those skills that they're going to need as an adult, as a professional in the real world and outside of the school world. So with that, we're going to jump into app smashing. App smashing is when you take multiple apps or tools and you smash them together to create one project. So I've got an example here that, for example, you might use Adobe Spark. That's a district approved tool. You might use Adobe Spark to create an image. There's a tool inside of Adobe Spark that can create like a really nice, beautiful, professional looking image. You might take that image, have students take that image, and then put that image into a slide. Maybe they write some stuff next to it. Maybe it's one of multiple slides. You know, they create maybe a slide presentation, a slideshow with this image. Then you might ask them to use Screencastify, another district-approved screen recording tool, to present their deck and record themselves talking about it. Then you might have them submit the whole thing to Google Classroom. So in the process of this project, you've used 4 different tools for them to do this project. Again, not every project is going to be stellar using all these different tools. Like that is literally exhausting, both for you and for students. But again, when you can think of these opportunities, when you have a chance to be creative and use those creative teacher juices, you know, think about, could I take, you know, this project of having them, you know, write a paper, could I change it into something that has them involve, you know, being creative, and maybe they work in groups and, you know, things like that. So that's what app smashing is. And you can absolutely app smash within Google and using tools outside of Google. So you can smash multiple Google apps together to make a cool project. But like I showed here, you can also use non-Google tools to do that. On this slide, and I'm on slide 7, you'll see that there's a link here to visit the Digital Backpack site. The Digital Backpack is the group of apps that are approved for use with students at Sfusd. These are tools that are safe. They don't sell student data. They are approved tools. Anything you find in the backpack, it is okay to use. If you have a tool you want to use that's outside of the backpack, if it asks for students' names or email addresses, has them log in any way, that's a tool that we need to have a data privacy contract in place with to make it okay to use. So you'll want to submit a help desk ticket about, and we'll talk more about help desk tickets in case you don't know what that is, but if you find a tool that you want to use that requires students to log in or requires them to identify themselves with their name or email address, you'd need to get that approved before you could use it with students. Just kind of a heads up. So with that, let's jump into our first set of Google tools. This slide 8, is kind of like a table of contents where you can use this to go to specific tools as slides within this deck. This is in alphabetical order. I'm not gonna go in alphabetical order. I've grouped them kind of as like, we're gonna talk about the core ones first, and then we'll talk about like kind of like the extra, maybe more creative, like immediately creative type ones. So I've divided them up that way. We'll also pause along the way to have some, I'm calling them chat checks, where it's a place for you to kind of get a chance to like think and process and then write out some ideas you might be having in the chat to share with others so that we can all get inspired by each other. So let's jump right in. Google Docs. Google Docs is Google's word processing tool. You might think of it, it's very similar to Microsoft Word. If you've used Microsoft Word, it's very, very similar. And so it's most of the times used for things like writing up a, bullet pointed notes, or writing a paper, or creating some sort of written thing like a newsletter, something like that. That's a lot of times what people think of Google Docs as being for, but you can actually use it for a lot of other really creative things. Because you can add links inside of Docs, you can also add pictures, you can actually add videos. There's a way to insert videos. There's lots of things you can put into a Google Doc. You can put a Google drawing right inside a Google Doc. You can actually use Google Docs for a lot of really amazing things that aren't just solely written things. So for example, you can use a Google Doc to make something called a hyperdoc. And the definition of a hyperdoc is a digital space where all components of a learning cycle have been pulled together into one central hub. And basically what that means is that it's almost like students are following through at their own pace this long activity that leads them all the way through the learning cycle. From that first inquiry, questioning part, all the way down to summarizing what they learned and making sense of it and that kind of stuff. So it's a really rich experience for students. And again, it's self-paced. And a lot of times there's choices involved in there. And so Google Docs work really well for that. You can also use a Google Doc to make a choice board. Choice boards are any sort of structure where students can make choices on how they complete the expectation, the requirement of that activity. So it might be where they get to choose what activities they do to practice a skill. It might be that they get to choose how they want to show that they've mastered or learned the information. I've done some that are tic-tac-toe, so they get to pick any 3 in a row, diagonal, up, down, across, whatever, that make that tic-tac-toe. I've done a bingo where, you guys, it's a 5x5 board with a free space in the middle, and students choose to make a bingo, whether that's diagonal, up, down, whatever it is. I've also done a 1 per column where they choose one thing from each column. You might think of that like a menu. A lot of times restaurants will have that where they've got maybe a bento box type of menu where you're picking one from each column. But there's lots of ways to structure choice boards, but those work really well inside of Google Docs. You can certainly use Google Docs also for written work, but it doesn't have to be plain, boring, boring, I'm just writing paragraphs in Google Docs. You can Google Docs. I did a training last year, and someone said that it should be called Google Docs, surprisingly beautiful. So you can do all sorts of really beautiful graphic design type of things in the way that you structure your doc, and that largely uses tables inside of Google Docs to hold up this structure. So I've linked here in this slide deck, again, I'm on slide 9, some examples of really pretty Google Docs. You'll actually see my resume is in there, but there's just lots of examples. There's a newsletter. There's all sorts of different things you can do to really make the Google Doc look nice, so it's not just paragraph, 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 paragraph. So just some inspiration for you. And then on this slide and on all the slides that I'm presenting today about tools, I've got links for you. We have a web page for educators on Google Docs. And so you can visit that page. It's got all of our resources, any resources we have created about Google Docs. It's got any resources that Google has about Google Docs. And then it's also got resources that we've taken from external non-Sfusd teachers, bloggers, that kind of stuff, ideas we found that we really like of ways to use Google Docs with students. So feel free to check that out. I made it, so I'm very proud of that page. I think it's a pretty cool page. But again, feel free to check that out. And that's a website, so you can come back to it at any time. You can bookmark it, whatever you want to do with it. We also have linked here a webpage for families. So we've been really working this summer on creating family resources that you can give to families when you assign something in Google Docs. You can be like, here's a resource to help you know how to use Google Docs. It is also built inside the Sfusd district website, and so it has auto translation features. So if you have families where their primary language isn't English, maybe they don't speak English at all, the website actually can be translated for them. And so it's pretty sweet. If you have families who are in trouble with some technology stuff, absolutely can send them there. Again, that's the link directly to. Also send them to the Google resources for families. There's an overall page that has links to all the different subpages like Google Docs. But this link here is specifically to Google Docs for families. So that is Google Docs. Google Slides. I am currently using Google Slides. That's got that caption feature that you saw earlier. The Google Slides are generally thought of as like PowerPoint, like some sort of like going through a slide deck I'm presenting, but they don't have to be that way at all. Google Slides work really well for vision boards because they offer so many types of multimedia. You can add audio recordings to a Google Slide. You can put text, images, video inside of a Google Slide. And so it works really well for students to get creative, and you can like rotate things and all sorts of colors. It can be a really creative space for them. And if they need another page because they ran out of space on one, they can just add another slide. It's a really great space to like be creative and collage and mishmash and all sorts of stuff. Google Slides works much better with images than Google Docs does. So if you're doing stuff with a lot of images, even if there's text involved, if there's a lot of images or again that multimedia part, I would lean towards Google Slides. You can also use Google Slides for choice boards. So again, that same idea, if I wanted students to click on a picture, like an image instead of a link, I'd probably make my choice board inside of Google Slides just because it works so much better with pictures. You can do things I call them one-by-one activities. And what that is you have a slide deck where every slide is the exact same, and each student has their name on it, it's their slide. And everybody has an activity at the same time in the same deck. So then, for example, I've got a math class link, a math class example linked here. You can click on that and see what I mean. But in that example, students are asked to graph a function. And so you would have all the students hop into the deck, find their slide, and you might say, okay, everybody, let's graph y equals 2x. And they're going to take the arrow and tilt it and move it until their function, they've graphed y equals 2x. And then you as the teacher can just go down each slide and kind of see what everybody's got. It's a great formative assessment, check-in kind of practice activity type of space. So those are one-by-one activities. You can also use Google Slides for books and journaling, kind of like that vision board idea that it doesn't have to be like slides in a presentation. It can be like pages in a book that as you're, instead of thinking of it as slides, you can think of it as pages. And so it can be really, really nice as a space to like write, add text boxes and write things. I actually had a professor in graduate school that she had us use a Google Slides as our reading journal. And so every time we had a reading in class, we reflected in our slides, and she would go in and leave comments and that kind of stuff in our slides. But it was a chance for like You could add text boxes if you wanted to type stuff. You could insert videos if it was like, if like the thing we read about reminded you of a video, you could insert the video and like explain it. That journaling piece can be really helpful to help kids kind of make sense and make those connections to other things that they know right inside of Google Slides. And then same links down here. We have a Google Slides webpage for educators with resources for you. And then we have a webpage for families with resources and helpful information for families about Google Slides. Google Sheets. Google Sheets is a spreadsheet tool like Excel. And if you are like, I don't do spreadsheets, never fear. They're not as scary as they seem. Google Sheets is basically just a giant table. And it's really important to have students use spreadsheets and become comfortable and familiar and not terrified of spreadsheets. Most jobs in the professional world do involve some sort of, looking at spreadsheets and, data and considering different options. You think about even like a manager at a store, oftentimes has to look at inventory and make decisions about what to is not a bad thing. So I'd recommend having kids interact with spreadsheets just to help them be more comfortable and know kind of what do rows and columns mean, all of those things. I realized that backwards. I said rows and gestured up and down. Rows and columns, but having them, really become comfortable with that space, being able to locate a cell, all of those kinds of things. And the thing is that, like I said, Google Sheets is just a giant table. There is, you don't have to use it for math things. You can use it for anything that requires a table. So I encourage you to kind of think about how can I pull in sheets and use sheets with kids. You can also use Google Sheets to do self-checking math puzzles. You can have it with, via conditional formatting. If they put, a certain number in the blank, it'll turn a color. If it's any other number, it turns this color. You can have it do like those self-checking math puzzles, which is pretty cool. You can do a data analysis, especially with forms. Google Forms, we're going to talk about in just a minute. Google Forms is like a survey tool, and all of the responses that come with a form go into a spreadsheet. And so you can have students collect data about something. Maybe they survey people in their family about their favorite pizza topping. And then they can, see that like, 5 out of the 10 people like pepperoni, half the people like pepperoni. You can do that data analysis, create graphs and charts right inside of Sheets. And again, getting them used to and comfortable with how do I make it add things up in a sheet? How do I make a chart in a sheet? Those are all really good skills for kids to have. You can also use Google Sheets for checkboxes. There's a way to insert an empty checkbox that if you click on it, it gets checked. You click on it again, it gets unchecked. So students can certainly have checklists where they go down and they check things off as they do it. You can link things inside of a cell in Google Sheets. So I might say like, your first thing is to go to this website. Maybe I'm using Edpuzzle, one of our district approved tools. Click on here and complete the Edpuzzle assignment, come back and check it off that it's done and go down to the next one. Or maybe they need to have 6 checks and so they can pick which ones they want to do. That kind of checklist idea to check things off. There's also a way to tally up how many check marks they have. So I've used that before where I had a checklist and at the bottom, every time they checked one, the number went up 1. And so it was like a way to, it was basically counting how many were checked. So lots of ways you can use Sheets for really almost like responsive spaces. And then you can also use Sheets with approved add-ons. I touched on this a little bit with forms, but a lot of tools have a lot of add-ons work inside of Sheets. You need to do a mail merge where you were having general template go out to multiple people, but it needed to replace like the student's name or things like that. You can do mail merge with add-ons. You can have it when students submit responses to a form that it creates a Google Doc with their answers and then shares that Google Doc with them. There's all sorts of automated things you can do with add-ons, and a lot of those live inside of Sheets. Down below, same idea again. I've got resources for educators. I don't have a resource page yet for families. We're working on it, but right now there's just one for educators. Google Drawings. Google Drawings, the name is a little bit misleading, as in it's really hard to actually like draw inside of Google Drawings. It's more so for kind of multimedia images and text and that kind of stuff, shapes, all of those things. We make diagrams and stuff inside of drawings. It's great for vision boards and digital posters. We often see it used for digital posters because you can put in an image. You can put shapes with text inside of them, that kind of stuff. You can use it for graphic design to create headers for forms. Google Forms can have custom headers. You can have custom headers in Google Classroom. You can use it to create logos and icons and things like that. So we see it used a lot for graphic design. You can also use it for drag and drop activities. So kind of similar back to the one-by-one activities in slides. You can have a student, you can, in your Google Drawing, you could create a Google Drawing that has like a heart, a human heart, as like the background image, which means it can't be changed or like dragged anywhere. And then students could label the parts of the heart right on top of it. And that heart background image is going to stay, but the text boxes could be, you could have them already filled out, they just drag them to where they go. It could be they add a text box and type in the name. There's lots of ways to kind of do those like drag and drop and movable activities with inside Google Drawings. I've seen people have students sort shapes into different categories, whether it's a quadrilateral or just a polygon or things like that. So lots of things you can have students drag and move things around inside of drawings. You may also want to consider Chromecanvas. Chromecanvas is a totally separate tool from drawings, but that's really more of that like drawing tool. They have different like pens, whether it's like spray paint or chalk or like a marker inside of Chromecanvas, and it's more of like a sketching, drawing type of tool. So that might actually work better if you're looking for something for actually drawing. I've linked here that we do have educator resources and family resources for Chromecanvas. If your students are using a Chromebook, Canvas is an app right on the Chromebook. If they're not using a Chromebook, they just have to use the Chrome browser, only available in Chrome. If they use Safari, Internet Explorer, something else to access Chromecanvas, it'll just give them an error. So that is something also to consider if you're going to do drawing type stuff with students, to have them use, make sure that they're using Chrome as their browser if you're going to use Chromecanvas. And then down below, same thing, link to a webpage on drawings for educators and link to a webpage on drawings for families. Okay, one more and then we'll do a chat check. Google Forms. I've touched on this already. It's that survey tool. It's really great for anytime you want to get the same information from a group of people. So check-ins is a great way to kind of get students like, how are you feeling today? Forms work really well inside a classroom. It actually does a tally for you. It'll count how many students have turned it in versus how many haven't yet. So you can kind of check on the ones that haven't yet. So it's good for check-ins. It's great for formative assessment. You can tell a form based on how they answer a multiple choice question to go to a certain part of the form. That's called branch logic. And so I can tell a form that if they pick this answer to go ahead and move them to the next question, if they pick any of the other answers, they're going to multiple choice question, pick any of the other answers to take them to this, like, nope, try again, click the back button and try again. So you can give that like instant feedback through forms. You can use it for data collection. We talked about this when we talked about sheets that students could survey family members or friends or other classmates as to get certain data points and then be able to use that for analysis. Basically, forms standardize the data they're collecting. Everybody's filling out the same questions. And so you can actually also use it to collect bibliography information. If they're doing research, that it asks for the author's name, the title, the year, all those pieces of information. Maybe it's got a space for notes where they take notes on it, and it's going to pull that all into a spreadsheet for them. And again, another way to use spreadsheets with students. So that's a way to use forms. And then lastly, you can use it for checks for understanding with a video. You can actually insert a video into a form, and then you can put questions underneath and ask questions about that video. So another way that you can use forms. We have a page here linked on resources on forms for educators. There's not one for families, just because when it comes to filling out a form, there's not a whole lot of options or buttons or tools or things to click on like there is in Docs. In Docs, it's like, here's some helpful buttons to look for. In Forms, that isn't so much the case. So if you're gonna have students create forms, they might need some support from you. But we do have a page on resources for educators. Okay, time to process. We heard many things. That was 5 tools. That was already almost halfway through. So I'm gonna do a chat check. So go ahead and type your answer into the chat. Are there any tools or activities so far that you're thinking you might try with students this year? You're not committing to anything, just if you're like, ooh, this sounded interesting, I might try this, or I'm really thinking about how I could use Docs, just we'd love to hear it. So take a moment to kind of think. We're gonna share ideas. I'll be quiet for a second. Drink some more coffee because I need that, I guess. Awesome. Seeing a lot of like Google Drawings, Google Forms, slides. Ooh, yeah, Chromecanvas would be really great for art. Oh, slides is an interactive workbook. That's a cool idea. I like that a lot. Slides and sheets. Anyone who says sheets, I love you. Google Forms for daily wellness checks. Yep. Mail merge. Hannah mentioned mail merge for family communications. We also have through Teacher View, which is the student kind of like gradebook student information system. There's a way to email families and contact families through there. But if you had, if you wanted more detailed information or things like that, certainly could be a good tool. Oh, Erin talked about slides for students to make process portfolios. That's a really cool idea. We talk a lot, one of the mindsets we work on at SFUSD is process over product. That, you think about like if you're learning how to build a birdhouse and in the end the birdhouse doesn't look that great or like it falls apart, you probably still learned a lot along the way. And so having that like a way to like process, show the process of things they learned along the way, even if like the final product isn't this amazing, beautiful 3-story birdhouse, right? So yeah, great ideas, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing those. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. These next, I would consider those previous 5 kind of like the really like core standard Google tools. They have, kind of like pretty clear alternatives to them, like Docs is like Word and Slides is like PowerPoint. The next set of tools are more, I would say almost like more creative and very unique. You don't necessarily find them anywhere else. There's really no other comparison to them for many of them. And so I'm really excited when we do our next chat check to see kind of what you're thinking about using these ones for. All right, we're gonna start with Google My Maps. Google My Maps is based on Google Maps, but it allows you to create a custom map. So you might see in Google Maps, you could type in, like hot dog restaurant, right? And find hot dog restaurants. You can click on the pin of the restaurant. It tells you, shows you some pictures, tells you some information about it. You or students can actually create a custom map where you choose where the pin is, and then you choose what's in that pop-up. You can write things, you can add links to things, you can attach pictures, you can even attach videos. Essentially, you can make your own custom Google map. And so what that does is that makes it really great for actually a lot of different things, not even just, like geography or history type things. It is great for exploring geographical places. You can measure distance between stuff. You can get directions between 2 places. It works that same way that I can put a pin, at my house, and I can put a pin at Allison's house and have this map that's customized that has just our 2 houses on it, but I can get directions as part of this map. So it's a really neat way to kind of, think about how do you get from one place to another. I used it when I was a Spanish teacher in our directions unit. Like giving and telling directions. I had students do directions between 2 points of interest in a Spanish-speaking country. Like maybe the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid, Spain, and then also directions to the Real Academia Española, the place where the Spanish language is like what's officially in the Spanish language is decided by those people. And so like the directions between the 2, that you can use it for that. You can also use it though for storytelling. So I've seen examples from English language arts classes or literature classes where the students create a map that follows a character's journey through a story and the places they go in that story. And then in those pins, they can put, pictures that match what the character does there. They can write up a little bit about why that part is important. I've seen it where they actually write a journal as if they are the character in that place. So kind of like putting ourselves in a character's shoes and like writing up a journal of like how they're feeling and stuff at that place. And so it can be, again, like a journey that a character takes. It can be a journey that a historical figure takes, but it also could be their own journey that maybe they tell their own story through this different geographical spaces. So instead of writing a book, they tell a story through My Maps. Very cool idea. You can also crowdsource places. And so you can kind of get to know your students, learn about your students, if have them all add a pin on a map to their favorite place in the world or to the best place to get ice cream or a favorite park. In the central office, we actually have a map that is shared among all of us in the central office. Is like the best restaurants around the central office building, where are the good places to go get lunch. And we even have it separated out to different types of cuisine, sub shops and Thai places, coffee shops. We've got it all separated out. So you can crowdsource in that way with students or with adults. And then the last thing to use My Maps for, it's kind of an out-of-the-box way, is to visually demonstrate information. That map is the whole world. So you can zoom as far out as you want or as far in as you want. And you can demonstrate information. What are the 10 cities in the country with the highest graduation rates? and you'll see the pins on the map, and they can include information, links to it, that sort of stuff. You can have it map locations where political candidates have visited. And so again, showing that like that distribution of where the places they're visiting. They're spending a lot of time on the coast and not so much time in the middle, you know, things like that. So there's a lot of ways, again, to like visually demonstrate pieces of information that aren't just like a list or aren't just, you know, a graph. We've got 2 sets of links here for you, an educator page, and then we also have a page on My Maps for families to help families use My Maps and create things in My Maps. Google Arts and Culture. This actually probably is my absolute favorite, hands down, Google tool. And I think it's kind of like, I think almost the name kind of misleads people as to what it's really for. Basically, they wanted to take arts and cultural things and like use technology to make them better. And so, but it's not even just, you know, like looking at the Mona Lisa or things like that. You can explore history, geography, and science, but you can search for different art movements, different mediums, by a specific artist, by a specific place in the world, and it'll pull up all sorts of things at that place. You can search for a historical figure, things related to that historical figure, an event, and then even curated collections. They create a collection around a theme. And so it's really neat to see all the things that, you know, fit under these different areas you can search for. And then once you've found things that you're looking at, I honestly, when I was making the slide deck, I went to go like, you know, make sure I knew all the things that I could put on the slide, and I wasted like 20 minutes just like poking around arts and culture. I was like, what? You can do this too? So if you have a spare 20 minutes, I'd recommend just poking around arts and culture and seeing what you can find, because it's a really cool site. But you can take a tour. You can do virtual field trips. So you can actually, you might know about Google Street View when you're doing maps, where you can like see it like as if you're walking down the street, and you can like explore, and I can walk this way down the street, and I can turn and go this way. I can zoom in on a house, you know, things like that. They have that for certain museums and places around the world on Google Arts and Culture. So students can like walk around the Louvre. And so it's, you know, it's not only the fact that we can't do field trips right now anyway with kids, it's you can take field trips to crazy places that you could not ever actually take kids. So highly recommend checking those out. There's also a way to see, you can see high definition imagery of certain artworks. You can like zoom way in and see like the paint strokes. Pretty neat. And they have 360-degree videos of places and like performances. So I'm thinking one of the examples I've used before is they've got a symphony performing a song. And so it's like a video, but you can like turn anywhere in that video and like look at something. So you can watch the trumpet player the whole time, or you can go and like watch the flute player the whole time. Like you can move around while the piece is being performed. So it's just like there's all sorts of things they have. They have like like rooms at NASA that you can like watch as like things are happening. They've got this 360 video being taken as things are happening, and so you can like watch people do their jobs. Like, and they're recordings, not live or anything like that, but like, well, they're live when they were recorded, but they're not currently live. But you can just, there's all sorts of really amazing things you can see that might not have come to mind when you thought of arts and culture. You can do research in them with primary sources. I saw a really neat project by a teacher where she had students search different primary sources, letters, posters, stuff like that. And then they had to narrow it down. They had to narrow it down to 7. There's the 7 best primary sources for their topic, and they just narrow it down to 4. And so it's like that idea of like, which one's the best for the topic I'm doing. Really neat project idea. And you can also curate your own collections. As you're going through arts and culture, you can favorite things. And then once you've favorited it, you can add it to a collection. So you can, you know, create a collection that you can then share via link with students. You can go on and pull all these different pieces that make sense to be in the collection for whatever your topic is. And then using the link for that collection, you can share that link within Google Classroom or however you're communicating with students to give them that collection to kind of browse through. Also, the Arts and Culture app, that I said the A and C because I didn't want to write out Arts and Culture. The Arts and Culture app on this has other tools that aren't part of what you see on the website. For example, you can actually build a virtual gallery, like paintings on the wall type gallery that you can like have. It's using augmented reality, so it's like your camera is showing you where you currently are, but it's got like the paintings like laid over it. So it's you can like create a virtual gallery. That's one that you may not be able to do with students right now with distance learning, just because of they need to have a device that can access the Arts and Culture app, which they may not have. But just kind of, again, so you get those juices flowing, that's something you certainly use. The Arts and Culture app is a little bit different than the website. So I'd recommend checking that out if you have a device that can check out that. tool. Again, link on the bottom to our webpage for educators about arts and culture. Google Keep. I mentioned this one a little bit earlier. It's basically digital sticky notes. And it's really great for to-do lists. You can share a to-do list amongst a group, and as people finish tasks, they can check them off. I share a grocery list actually on Google Keep with my partner. And so as we go, you know, as something gets used up or whatever, or we have a craving for something, we can add the item to the list, and then whoever happens to go to the grocery store has our joint list. So that's a pretty nice, pretty convenient way to create a grocery list. You can also use Google Keep to take notes. You don't have to have check marks at all. It can just be an open note space, and you can take notes when it gets too long. There's a built-in feature to copy what's in that note to docs, and then remember you can share that note. So a lot of times when Allison and I are in a meeting together, one of us will start a keep note, share it with the other, and then we've both got this collaborative keep note. So that's a pretty nice feature of Keep. It's also just a really great tool to build organizational skills. Everybody has a different organizational style. I'm definitely a Post-it note person, as I showed you earlier, but I like physical Post-it notes. I like physical to-do lists. Those work better for me because once I write it down, it really sticks in my brain, but not everybody is like that. And students, you know, similarly will have different organizational things that work for them. So this is a tool that students do have access to. They can absolutely create keep notes. They can share their keep notes with you. You can make a keep note and share it with students. So just a thought that you can also kind of encourage students if they're having trouble organizing themselves, or if they need a different tool, way to do it, they can actually use Google Keep. And we've got a page here for Google Keep for educators, resources for educators. And then we also have the family page is coming. It's not done yet. It's one of my Post-it notes, but it's not done yet. So it's coming. Google Jamboard. Jamboard is a digital whiteboard. And to be clear, there's two types of Jamboard. There are physical Jamboard devices. They're basically TVs on wheels, and they run the Jamboard software. The district does not own any physical Jamboards because they're expensive and all they do is Jamboard. However, the Jamboard software is free and you absolutely can use. And basically it creates a digital whiteboarding space that you can share with other people. It can be a collaborative digital whiteboarding space. That works really well for brainstorming. People can add little text notes, like little Post-it notes, and type things in. You can add images, you can add links, there's stickers, there's a pen where you can like circle an idea. It's pretty cool. I would recommend doing it with small groups. I would not put 30 kids in on the same jam. But like 3, 4, 5 students on a jam would be okay. It can also be a group workspace. There's a way to add multiple pages to a jam. Up at the top, you can add another page, kind of like slides. You can add another slide, same idea that, this jam page is our space to think about what our introduction is going to be about. This jam page is our space to think about what our, first body paragraph is going to be, our first, 3 slides are going to be about, whatever it is that they're organizing. You can separate it out into different spaces. And then it's also really, really great. I saw a teacher use it this spring for a place to like personally reflect and journal, like we talked about with slides, that each student's got their own space to add ideas. They can add more pages. And it's just kind of like a different multimedia space. So we all have spaces that we really flourish in. That for some people, Google Docs, the way it's linear, it goes down, it really works well with their brain. Some people like a more of an open space to kind of rearrange things and collage. And so giving students options on which space they want to use, or just not always using the same space. Like I would not always do a Jamboard, getting students to, be out of their comfort zone a little bit sometimes, in their comfort zone other times. Those are all good things for learning. So, but a Jamboard can be another space to kind of collage, or again, do more multimedia type stuff. And we've got links here for the Google Jamboard webpage for educators, and again, a page to help families use Jamboard. So, great. Chat check. I know I said a lot of things. I talked a lot. I'm going to stop talking for a second. And I'm just curious kind of, what you're thinking about. How would you integrate some of these tools like Maps, Post-it notes, Jamboard, the unit? And again, you're not committing to anything, just getting some ideas from each other. So go ahead and type your ideas and your thoughts into the chat. These are great ideas. Carissa, I think I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, talked about using maps for virtual physical education, that students could log different points in the map where they did an activity, or like how far they went with directions. I started running here and I finished running here. Yeah, definitely a cool idea. Jamboard, if your document camera is not working, could be very useful. Yeah, the culture one, every time I go on there, I'm like, what, they also have that? I'm always astounded by all the things they have. I went down a NASA rabbit hole not yesterday, but the day before when I was working on this slide deck. So definitely just poke around arts and culture and like see what you find. It's relevant and applicable to more subject areas than its name suggests. Let's see, Jamboard facilitating group activities. Yeah, so where you used to be able to do like manipulatives and stuff in real person and like share that as a group, you can actually do that with a Jamboard. And Google Meet is one of our video conferencing tools you can use to meet with students. We are currently using Zoom for this particular training, but Google Meet is an option you do have. And Google Meet and Jamboard, Google is working on an integration where they're going to talk really nicely to each other. So that's something that's coming. You'll see Jamboard as part of Google Meet. So if you're thinking about having students like collaborate on a Google Jamboard, Meet might be a really good tool to do that with. Visiting heritage sites, yeah, all sorts of great ideas. Google Meet does not currently have annotation. Larry asked that. If it has annotation, it does not. Zoom does. But Google Meet, we're going to see a bunch of features come out. Google works in quarters, not in school years. So at the end of Q3, which is the end of September, they've promised all sorts of things like breakout rooms and all sorts of stuff. So we can expect to see a lot of things come out in September. A lot of really great Meet features. So just kind of know if you're using Meet, you might see some changes in September.
There was also a comment about using maps to demonstrate where newcomers are coming from and post that. And I mean, I've also seen that with literature as well, where a story that documents an immigration story, and students are actually able to then incorporate other content areas into this journey through maps, measurement, history, science, all that.
Yeah, you can do lots of really cool stuff with maps too. We tend to think of maps as like getting to a place, but there's so many creative ways, again, to tell stories, to get to know your students with maps. It's one of those tools. My Maps is one of those tools that can be as complex or as simple as you want it to be. So I recommend checking out My Maps when you have the bandwidth, when you have the time, to take some time and think about My Maps, because it's much like arts and culture. It's relevant to more subject areas than its name suggests. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move along. I have a couple more, and then I'm gonna give you some time I call it cooling down. It's like a time to process and take some more. So Google Chrome is SFUSD's recommended browser. It comes automatically installed. If you get a district laptop, Google Chrome is already on there. If you have a home device you prefer to use instead, or if you aren't eligible for a district device, we recommend using Chrome. It's the most secure. It works the best with Google tools. However, we also recommend setting up separate profiles for work and personal accounts. So if you've ever managed multiple Gmail accounts at once or multiple Google accounts at once, sometimes you end up like being in the wrong account. You're checking your email in one, and maybe you're checking your email in your work account, and then you click on a document and you go to it and it says you don't have access, and you're like, but I should. It's and it turns out it's because now you're actually in your personal account, and so that kind of like mismatch and confusion and like crossing of accounts, you can prevent that by setting up separate profiles. And what that does is that gives you a separate window for work things that you're just signed into your work account in this window. And then in a entirely separate window, you're signed into your personal account. And so they aren't getting crossed. You're not accidentally in the wrong account ever, which is really nice, because I don't know about you, but like I don't want families having my personal email account. They should have my school one. I don't want to accidentally email them from the wrong account. So keeping those separate is a really great idea. There's a video linked right here in the slide deck. It's also on that link below the Chrome webpage for educators. The video is also there. So you can also get it by being on the our Google website. But basically she talks about why to keep them separate and then how to actually do it. And I highly recommend it, setting that up before the school year starts. It also allows you to have entirely separate bookmarks. So like the things that I've bookmarked on my personal account, I do not want bookmarked on my school account. They don't fit. You know, if I'm shopping for a new sofa, I don't want my sofa bookmarks on my school account. So it also keeps like all that stuff totally separate. It's also really good to know, excuse me, if I was gonna sneeze. It's really good to know if a tool works only in Chrome. So I'll use the example of Chromecanvas. Chromecanvas only works in Chrome. And so you may need to kind of check on tools like that just to make sure that it's not a tool that only works in Chrome, because you can't always guarantee that a family or a student is using Chrome at home. Chromebooks do use Chrome. They only use Chrome. So if the students have Chromebooks, they're going to be on Chrome. But as far as like if students are using a home device, or if they're on like a tablet or something like that, you'd want to make, if it's a tool that only works in Chrome, you'd want to make sure that students are using Chrome. We do have a Chrome webpage for families. It's coming. It's one of my post-its. It's just not quite done yet, but it's coming. You can check back. And then here's that really brief touch on Google Classroom. Classroom is basically your digital, Classroom is basically your digital learning space for your students. It is where you can assign and collect work. The work that's collected has to be some sort of digital thing, but that doesn't mean you only should assign kids digital things to do. I can ask students to build the tallest tower they can using only paper clips and toothpicks, and then take a picture of it and submit the picture to Classroom. So like the tower is the assignment, but the picture is the thing they turn in. So, you know, you can also think about Classroom that way, that they don't only have to be doing digital things to turn in their work. You can have them, you know, draw a picture that uses a square, a circle, and a triangle in it, and then take a picture of it and submit it. So Classroom, again, is that space to like organize your assignments, the things you're asking them to do, and then like the spaces where they give those assignments to you. But it doesn't have to only be digital things that they do. Classroom has a couple really cool features. Again, if you are new to Classroom and don't know anything about it or don't really feel comfortable with it yet, I recommend joining for our session specifically on Classroom. We'll go in depth, we'll talk about all the things, but I just wanted to kind of note two things here that are kind of like pro tips about Classroom when you're using it. Classroom can make a copy of something for each student for you. So remember I talked about with Google Drawings, like the diagram of the heart and then labeling the parts of the heart. You can have Google Classroom, you create that template, the empty diagram of the heart, maybe it has the text boxes already they're going to drag down, and then tell Google Classroom to make a copy for each student, and Google Classroom will make the 30 or 35 copies, whatever it is that you need. You don't have to sit and make copies for each kid. It'll do it for you. And then each kid only sees their own copy, which is even better. They don't have to click on the correct link that's theirs, that they only see their own copy. So I'd recommend if you're doing anything that where you'd want each student to have their own of a template, to check that out. You can also give a group a space to work. Classroom allows you to assign an assignment to specific students only, meaning the other kids that it's not assigned to, they won't even see it, they won't know it exists. And so you can actually create spaces for groups to work where each group just has their own one space if they're working on a project. We talked about a jam being a space that you do that with Jamboard. But basically you would check just the students that want access to it, you know, maybe 3 or 4 students, maybe 5, and then attach their space to work. You can choose it so that Classroom will automatically give them edit access to that space, and then it's just those 3 to 5 students in that one space, and no other students are going to see other groups as things. So that's something you can do within Classroom as well. I've got an extra link for you down here. We've got the normal one for educators, the page about Classroom for educators. We also have a link to our school year 2020-2021 guidance. Excuse me, I don't know what's in my nose today. We have a guidance page, and that guidance helps. It was designed for teachers who started distance learning last year and are trying to make sense of like the things they did in the spring and like how do I move that into the fall. But basically it starts with like create a new classroom, archive the old one, topics. It really walks you step by step on how to set up your classroom. And it goes from basics, like create a class, add topics, that kind of stuff, all the way down to kind of best practices, like, do you want to add video instructions? Here's how you add video instructions. Do you want to, do group work? Here's how you do group work. So it's got a lot of great options and ideas and things in there. I'd recommend checking it out if you're going to use Classroom. And then we also have a Google Classroom webpage for families. You can share with families that help them know, like, here's where the turn-in button is, and like things like that to really help them navigate and use Classroom successfully. Okay, we're going to do a cool down. It says 11:40, but it's actually 2:20. I did forget to change that. Can I exit out of that and change that? 2:20 p.m., not a.m., my goodness. Okay. Can you all still see my shared screen? Thumbs up, great. So at 2:20, that's about 13 minutes or so. I'm just gonna give you some time to cool down. We talked about, I talked about a lot of things. I'm gonna give you a chance to kind of explore. I've got our Google resources linked here. You can click on that and kind of poke around and see what you can find. If you wanna play around with Google Arts and Culture for the next 13 minutes, fully support that. It's also some time if you want to like jot down some notes or ideas, like as I'm a percolator, I need time to like think and process, and like then I'll have a great idea later. So like I take in information and it just like simmers inside and I'm like, oh, I have an idea. So if you take some time to kind of simmer and jot some ideas, you can also type questions into the chat. And so then we'll kind of answer questions in the chat. So at 2:20, we're gonna come back together. If you need to like get up and like take a lap around your house or like go get some water, by all means, feel free to do that as well. But at 2:20, we'll come back together and we'll finish up with some closing moves for the day. Benefit from hearing about. Someone asked about the website and translating for families. The website can be auto-translated, but the families have to select the language. It also, when you do that, it changes the URL a little bit. So you actually could share if you're working with newcomer families, you could actually share the translated URL. But Allison was describing it that if you go to the sfusd.edu website, there's a red banner at the top that talks about COVID and all sorts of things there. But just below that, there's a navy blue banner, and on the left side, you can choose a language, and you'll actually notice that the URL changes. So you could share that URL directly with families if you know that which language they would need. And then somebody else asked about how to find these apps. In Google, there's something I call the waffle. It's that up in the, when you're in Gmail, up in the upper right-hand corner, it's that like 3x3 little grid. It kind of looks like a little waffle. When you click on that, you can access a lot of Google tools right inside of there. Google also uses the same format pretty much for all of its tools. So Google Slides, you can find at slides.google.com. Google Arts and Culture is artsandculture.google.com. So you can kind of use that pattern, keep.google.com to find different tools. And then lots of things live inside of Drive. So Google Drive is kind of like the big file folder. We didn't talk about that one today, kind of like a giant file cabinet. You can actually make new things and whatnot right inside. I don't have to go to slides.google.com to create a new slide deck. I can make it inside of Drive in the folder I want it in. But on the Google web pages for educators, on each of those slides, there's also the very top thing is about access, which grade levels have access to different tools, and for the most part, everybody has access to everything. But right underneath that, it talks about how to actually find that particular tool if you need help with that. So feel free to check that out. We're gonna wrap up with some closing moves. We'd love it if you'd please fill out the feedback form. Allison's gonna put that feedback form link into the chat right now. You can also scan the QR code with your phone. But we'd love to hear what you're thinking. Even though new teachers only ever attend new teacher orientation once, next year you won't be a new teacher anymore. We really work every year to make new teacher orientation better. So we'd love to hear your feedback. This was our first fully virtual new teacher orientation, but it's possible that maybe next year we might still be doing virtual. That's hard to say. So please give us feedback, help us make it better. We'd love to hear what you thought so that we can continue improving every single year so that each set of new teachers gets the best experience we can possibly provide at the time. So Allison put that in the chat. Please take a moment to fill that out. While you're doing that, I'm going to go through just a few announcements. This next slide here is a link to our kind of general Sfusd Google resources. I've got the link here, the resources for Sfusd employees. That was the that's like a tool by tool basis, and all the subpages for specific tools fit under that main page. So you can always bookmark that main page and then get to all the different tools as pages. I've got our resources for families page linked here as well. Again, same idea that it's got all of our subpages. So like the Google Docs page for families lives under the Google page for families. And so you can certainly share that Google page for families with families in general as a resource for them to use as they use different Google tools with different teachers. The navy blue bubble is Google for Instruction. And this is, instead of being tool focused, it's more like instructional practice focused. So on there, you'd find information like, I want to do collaboration, which Google tools work really well for collaboration. I want to do formative assessment, which Google tools work really well for formative assessment. So I would recommend checking that page out and seeing all the different things that different educational practices and what Google tools you can use to support those. And then the last bubble is to submit a help desk ticket. We talked about this earlier before, but help desk is where you submit anytime you have questions or something seems like it's not working right or things are broken or you need, you don't have access to something you feel like you should have access to. That's all done through help desk. And what's really nice about help desk is that the ticket comes in and the help desk staff send it out to the team that it belongs to. So if you're having, for example, if you were having trouble with connecting to the Wi-Fi at a school site, they would send your ticket to the Wi-Fi team. It gets sent to the person that handles those particular issues within Department of Technology. So submitting a help desk ticket is always a great way to go to get the fastest help. I will tell you, just a heads up, at the beginning of the year, there's always tons and tons of tickets, and even more so this year since people are relying heavily on technology for all of their work. So just be patient, but we do get to all of them, and you will get an answer and you will get your problem solved. So you can submit a help desk ticket there. I also want to put in a plug for Digital District Day 2020. That is 1 week from today. Allison and I are basically the planning team for this event. So we'd love it if you would join us. You can RSVP. You don't need an Sfusd email address to attend. You can RSVP, and then you'll be able to log into our Sfusd page. I would recommend starting with the website, this DDD website link down here. I'd recommend starting there. That has a link to the RSVP form. It has a link to the Sfusd where you can sign up for sessions. It has some like attendee orientation information, like how do I join sessions and things like that. All of that stuff is also on the website. So I'd recommend actually, the link to RSVP is right here, but I actually say go to the website first and like read some stuff in RSVP while you're there and all that kind of stuff. Just a heads up, it does take a little bit of time from the time you RSVP to the time you can log into Sfusd. that just takes a little bit of time. But the RSVP first, and then half an hour later, you'll be able to log into Sched and sign up for sessions and join us. We currently have, I think it's like 1,400 people are coming. It's a big deal. So we'd love to have you join us. It's also totally virtual. I don't know if I said that. And then the very last thing, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for coming today. I've got some links here on the right side of this slide. Some links again to Help Desk. Help Desk also has a phone number you can call. We also have a link to the PD calendar. So if you're looking for more, like I'd like to do more, I want to learn more about Google Cloud. I can't go to the session this time because I already have other sessions I'm signed up for. All that kind of stuff is going to be on the PD calendar. You can absolutely sign up and join us. Allison, I'm going to have you put a link to the webinar recordings. I put that in the document for you. You can also watch recordings of past webinars we did in the spring. We churned out like tons of webinars, and you can watch recordings. And what's nice is I do talk kind of fast. So you can actually there's an option on there to slow me down. I can talk at 75% speed for you. You can pause it and go play the thing and then play it and keep going. So recordings actually are really useful. Allison did put that link in the chat. I didn't put it in the slide deck. I apologize for that. But feel free to check out those recordings too and get some training and help and support that way. So that is it. We are done, I think, like 3 minutes early. If you want to stick around and ask Allison and I questions, we're happy to stay until 2:30. If you want to also log off and go take care of some things before your next session, by all means, feel free to do that as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to work with you today. So anyone leaving, take care. Welcome, Erin. Thanks for coming today. Thanks, Larry.